In today's episode, we're going to dive deeper into our starting pitching staff. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the weekly episode of the Seattle Baseline Podcast. My name is Julian Smith, and I'm with Alex Hong. Well, Alex, we've got news, we've got pitching stuff, but most importantly, we got a super in depth comment from one of our viewers, and Army Chowmain 8021 has commented a ton of stuff about the starting pitching staff that we talked about last week. And today we're going to talk about that. But first of all, we have some news. We have some news from the Cubs. Alex, can you explain to us what happened in the Cubs deal and like what does it mean?
Yeah, so a guy named Alex, who isn't me, signed. Well, let's just say he's now, well, he was already pretty rich, but now he's even more richer because he just signed with the Cubs a 5 year, $175 million deal, which is an average of $35 million a year. So he wanted his long-term deal. He got his long-term deal. Now he can, relax and buy a ton of like Lamborghinis or something. I don't know what he's going to do with this money, but he has a lot of money now, right? And obviously, from the Mariners' perspective, we talked about Bregman, but ultimately, our conclusion was that Bregman would be too expensive for a team like the Mariners to sign, right? Probably not the type of player the Mariners were exactly looking for. So, wasn't really expecting Bregman to join the Mariners, even though they had some conversations. I don't think those were very serious. So, I'm not very surprised him not signing with the Mariners. But interestingly enough, he did sign with the Cubs, and that brings a lot of interesting questions with another guy we talked about maybe like a month ago in the podcast is about Nico Horner. So Julian, how would you assess this entire Bregman Horner Cubs situation at this point, and how does it affect the chances of maybe Horner joining the Mariners?
Yeah, so when we were talking about Horner earlier, we are like, okay, this guy's a 1 year contract. If the Cubs feel like they have a better chance of not full on rebuilding, but maybe taking off, shedding some star players that they have right now that are on 1 year contracts to then go out and get prospects and leverage that they can get to be good in the future, maybe that becomes a more solidified team that long term they will be better off. But from what the Cubs have been doing recently, I think with Kyle Tucker last year, he was traded to the Cubs as a one year deal. And so that's I kind of reference that. I think Nico Horner is that same level as Kyle Tucker, and especially with that being a 1 year deal, him being a pretty superstar level second baseman, I think that the Cubs are going to try to keep that 1 year contract the same way that they traded for Kyle Tucker using prospects and what's the third baseman?
Paredes?
Yeah, Isak Paredes. The same way that they traded away prospects and Isak Paredes for the 1 year contract, I think that they're going to keep Nico Horner for one more year and try to win the championship that way.
Yeah, I agree with you on that part. Maybe Horner is not as good as like how Tucker was, but if you think about it, right, they signed Bregman, they want to win, right? You don't sign Alex Bregman if you're not interested in winning, right? And the best chance of winning is you keeping your players instead of trading them for maybe some prospects, right? So the situation that we talked about of how Nico Horner could get traded is the Cubs, taking that year off. Maybe, we're losing Tucker, or maybe we should recoup some prospects, but clearly they're signing Bregman, they want to go all out. So if I were the Cubs, I would not trade Nico Horner. I would try my best to win the World Series this year, right? So that's probably off the table. That would not, it would be very interesting and weird for the Cubs to trade away Horner after signing Bregman. And this is not really a team that's that lacking on the funds. If that was the issue, right, with the money, I mean, they just signed Alex Bregman to $35 million a year. I don't think the funds were really too much of an issue, right? Might be a little different if that was the Mariners case, like if the Mariners somehow made this happen. But with the Cubs, I don't see Horner really being traded. So
No.
if we think about that, right, three options came off the board within the last week. So it's this one's a little off the trail with the Cubs, but Ketel Marte, he's now off the table. The card or the Diamondbacks, right? They're not trading him, so we know he's off the board. And now Bregman's obviously off the board because he just signed, and we most likely think that Horner is also off the board. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of players that did come off the board in this realm. So it makes the search for a second and third baseman a lot more difficult, but that is around the status of what's happening right now.
Yeah. And so now who do we turn to? Especially because if your premium second basemen are gone, you've got to turn to somebody that's maybe not a premium second baseman, but who's going to make your team actually better? Like better to go and win a championship. Because if you're not getting that much better, then you might as well keep your prospects. You might as well say, okay, this is one of those years where we're going to train our prospects in the big league club, and maybe 2027 we go out and win a championship. I don't think that that's what the Mariners want to do, and that's where the Mariners need to go out and find one of those second basemen. They have no more options. They really don't. Unless you really want to overpay for Brendan Donovan, you don't have many options. You're going out into a market that's clearly leveraging the fact that they have exactly what the Mariners want. And Eugenio Suarez, Mariners aren't mentioned in that. Not to say that he's going to be any good of a fit for the Mariners. We talked about that in previous episodes. I don't like Eugenio Suarez at T-Mobile Park, but maybe he's the only option. There's no options left for the Mariners to be playing around with, and this market is not going to change in the next few weeks before the season starts. It just doesn't work for the Mariners right now, and so it's desperation time. I think the Mariners either really need to see something good from Cole Emerson, or they need to go out and like not recklessly trade, but they need to overpay for a player who's going to make this club good for 2026 and elevate this club to the next level where we can win that championship.
Yeah, I mean, look, for the Mariners, right? They're trying to win a World Series this year, right? So sometimes the overpay is necessary. You see teams do this all the time, right? The Mason, well, there's been a lot of different trades in the past that seem like a massive overpay for what they're getting, but they're trying to win a World Series, right? So sometimes it's worth it, right? If we trade away some of our prospects, like, I don't know, we could say like any of the guys who aren't gonna play. So maybe what like we're probably gonna have Emerson come up. So these are probably not guys we're gonna trade, but any prospects like our outfielder like oh Las Montes, right? Like
Yeah.
I'm not exactly sure. He might come up, but even if he does, he kind of doesn't have a spot on the roster right now. So that's kind of a player who might not really help you in 2026, right? Unlike maybe Cole Emerson who is coming up. So sometimes, I'm not saying that's what the trade package is going to be, right? There's a lot of things that can influence that, but sometimes you got to think, okay, sometimes if we forego our future, like our future after 2026 to win a World Series, it would be worth it. So there's some considerations we have to do, but it makes it a lot tougher for sure at this point.
Yeah. And the Mariners, I think, are pretty close to being in the front runner seat for the AL West right now. I think the Astros, after signing Imai, a little bit more in that realm. And Texas Rangers, I think they're not really in it right now. I don't think personally. And the
Mhm.
Athletics just don't have the pitching staff to go out and compete. They have the batting, but they don't have the pitching staff. Angels, they're the Angels, so I don't even care. And yeah, and so the Mariners are pretty close to being in the front runners, but making the playoffs and winning the World Series are two different things. You can make the playoffs as the 2024 Detroit Tigers, and you can miss the World Series like the 2024 Detroit Tigers. But I think one of the main things here, aside from the Cubs and like what they're doing, the trades and everything, aside from what that's happening right now, the Mariners need to keep their players intact. The ones that they have now, the pitching staff that's supposed to be one of the top pitching staffs in the league, they have to keep Julio Rodriguez and Cal Raleigh happy. I'm sure Julio Rodriguez is not that stoked after yelling in the locker room last year at like during Brian Wu's interview. I'm sure he's not. And I'm sure Cal Raleigh is holding his Instagram rant, or not Instagram, his X rant that he was going to post, but he's like, okay, I can't be posting all this stuff right now. That's, like these guys want to make it to the World Series. And it really doesn't help when in arbitration, they're fighting for $400,000 for Bryce Miller. Alex, I think there's two options here. Are the Mariners working on something bigger, like a bigger deal, or are they just being insanely stingy over a arbitration price that doesn't increase the minimum pay of a major league player?
Yeah, it's such a weird situation. I mean, I get it from a business perspective, right? The Mariners are trying to preserve as much money as possible, right? I mean, if they don't think Miller is worth that much, they can do whatever they want, right? But there's a lot of problems with going to arbitration. You're literally arguing. So if people don't know the arbitration process, it's kind of complicated, but essentially we have the player and the team, they have an amount. If they can't agree, then an arbiter, right? A neutral arbiter will either decide to agree with the player's money or the team's money. And they're basically fighting in a court. So the player is going to explain why they deserve the money. The team is going to like basically talk bad about the player and say they don't deserve that much money. So that's essentially what the process is. And it just sucks because the team has to say, yeah, Bryce Miller is not good because so and so and so and so, right? So you're talking
Mm-hmm.
bad about your own player. Now, sometimes it is necessary about the money being so big. Like the Tariq Skubal, he wanted like 32 million. The Tigers won 19 million. It's like a record how much off they are. So that's going to be a complicated arbitration process. But with the Mariners, it's literally $400,000. In my personal opinion, I don't think it's worth going to court over $400,000. Now, if it was
No,
like $4 million, then okay, then yeah, maybe that's a little extreme, right? That you could do some stuff with $4 million. That was like half our budget last year, essentially. But with the Mariners, like I just don't know. I don't know. The Mariners don't surprise me in this. Like in terms of a stingy team, the Mariners are definitely one of them, but it's a tough situation, really. I hope it does get resolved, and hopefully Bryce doesn't take it too personally. Um, I know the Mariners. The Bryce should know that the Mariners definitely do value his work for the team. It's not like they're like just talking bad about him for no reason, right? But this is kind of a business, and it kind of has to happen. But like I said, it is kind of a complicated situation.
I mean, I know us two value Bryce Miller pretty high in this organization. For a young guy, he's developing pitches and he's been successful with those pitches in 2024. Those new pitches that he learned and then executed on the fly against teams, he's getting better and better every time. And then injuries haunted him this year. But is it really worth the $400,000? Like, I just can't believe it because you were saying this is a team that like doesn't want to spend money, but this is also a team that just gave Cal Raleigh a 6-year contract and Josh Naylor a 5-year contract. What are they doing arguing over $400,000? Like that to me just doesn't. Sure, the Mariners don't like to spend money, but who does this limit you from getting? I mean, you can get this is a player that's worth less than Mitch Garver would be worth this year that you're not going to be able to get because you gave an extra $400,000. I don't think the Mariners are that poor right now. And so it just to me like something doesn't click with what's going on and there must be something in the backstage that's like building up right now. Maybe like a little arbitration exit type contract just to get rid of arbitration for the next 3 years might be going on. I'm not sure, but it's if they do go into arbitration, it would suck, and that like the Mariners clearly wouldn't. They're saying that they don't value Bryce Miller worth $2.5 million. That's insane. Like the stuff that he was able to do before this was good. He's coming back from injury. He showed a little bit in that playoff, and you're still saying he's worth less than $2.5 million. Come on, that's just not true. But aside from that, well, hopefully Bryce Miller's situation gets solved, and we don't have to go into arbitration, and we don't have to have Miller and his team listening in on the Mariners basically just talking down about this like actually good player for however many hours in court. Hopefully that doesn't happen. But I think so Army Chowmain 8021 in the comment section for the previous episode commented a really in-depth analysis of what he thinks is going on with the pitching staff, and he asked a bunch of questions about prospects and like who's going to be opening day starter and stuff like that. Today, I want to talk about the opening day starter question because I think that when the Mariners go into 2025, one of the biggest decisions that Jerry Dipoto and Justin Hollander need to make is who is it actually going to be? Is it going to be Logan Gilbert like it was this year? Or does Bryan Woo switch in to get the job? So, Alex, what do you think of these two? And like, who do you think should be the opening day starter?
I mean, the funny thing is we kind of have different opening day starters like every year, right? It's been kind of a wild ride in that department. Now, in terms of like actual meaning, like in terms of who actually starts the first game, it doesn't really matter. But what it does matter is what the team views as who is the best pitcher, right? It really doesn't really matter who ends up starting the first game. But in that realm, right, how do we see the Mariners? And it's gonna tell us a lot of information about what the Mariners think because we have a lot of good pitchers, right? We have like Wu, Castillo, Gilbert, Kirby, and Wu, Gilbert, Castillo, Kirby, and Miller. Okay, we have
Yeah.
these five pretty good pitchers, and we can't keep them all. Like there was no way we're gonna keep them all. Gilbert's gonna reach free agency in a few years, and same with Kirby. Those two are coming up quick, so it might give us a tell of what the Mariners actually value in these guys because we would love to keep them all, but it's not realistic to happen in that case. So let's analyze what happened, right? So Gilbert, he had kind of a rough 2025 to say the least. There's several factors that led to that happening, but he was not as good as he was in years past. Now, Bryan Woo, on the other hand, he was excellent last year. He was our ace, right? I mean, clearly the team thought Bryan Woo was the ace, I'd say, like down the stretch in the end of the season. So it's be interesting to see what the Mariners think of that this upcoming year. So, Julian, what are your opinions on this? Because I'm a little torn on this personally, but I'm leaning one way. I'm currently leaning one way, but I want to know what your opinion is.
Yeah. Um, I am leaning towards Bryan Woo. And I think this isn't really a question for me of who do I think is going to end up being the best pitcher in 2025? Because you know what? It might be Luis Castillo for all we know. Luis Castillo might throw a 2.5 ERA season with his 95-mile-an-hour fastball and upgraded, or I don't know if it's upgraded, but upgraded compared to 2024 and 2025 changeup. It might happen. But I think in terms of who do we want on the mound the most times, it has to come down to consistency. And when I think consistency, I think Bryan Woo, because Bryan Woo throws the fastball 70 to 80% of the time, and he gets swing and miss on that. He has an arm angle that gets players to not be able to hit his fastball. The fastball is probably one of the most not normal, but one of the most needs to be good at type of pitches. If your fastball isn't good, then you can't play. That's why Bryce Miller had so much trouble in 2025 was because his fastball wasn't good. But Bryan Woo being a fastball heavy pitcher, I think eliminates that issue. That's where his simplicity comes from. He's very because he throws the fastball and then occasionally he'll throw the slider and the sweeper, the opposite moving. It's all like it's all games. And I think his strategy works the most out of anybody that's on the Mariners right now. I think that Logan Gilbert kind of fell out of that strategic loop in 2025. With the strategy, I think comes consistency. And I think Bryan Woo should absolutely be the opening day starter because that's going to give him the most um, plays against other teams.
Yeah, I mean, look, I kind of agree with you. Like Gilbert maybe didn't lose the starting position, but Brian Wu pitched so well that he kind of earned the opening day starting position, is the way I see it, right? And
Mhm.
Gilbert is very talented. He has a lot of good stuff. We talked about it last episode. First few times through the order, he's good, and then after that, it starts, he has like one bad inning and it kind of ends like that. But for Wu, he was our pitcher who would pitch like 7 innings consistently. So the comment talked about maybe some issues with Brian Wu and his like lack of innings, right? This is really his he had 2 good years. His first year was kind of he didn't play like the entire season, but I think he's played enough personally to earn that starting position, right? Now, Gilbert's still having the starting position. Last year, I kind of agree with that actually. I definitely agreed with that one. But this year, it's not like Brian Wu was pitched like five. It would be as if like the Toronto Blue Jays named Trey Savage the opening day starter. That would just be ridiculous. Like, okay, that's little extreme, right? Because he didn't pitch very much, even though Gossman, he's pitched for a long time. That's a different situation than what this would be. This is more or less like, okay, we've had a few good years of Wu, right? Like really, really good years of Wu. Gilbert maybe didn't do anything wrong, but it turns out we're kind of leaning towards trusting Wu the most. So I feel like Wu did. I think he should be the opening get starter because I think he has earned it the most. It's not like Gilbert technically lost it, or I don't think he should see it as a
No.
demotion per se, because we still value what he does, but this is just the way I see it.
Yeah, and Gilbert obviously has the most potential of the five pitchers. And I think if Gilbert plays to that potential the way that he did in 2024, well, once the All-Star break hits, okay, Gilbert goes back into the one spot. That's great. And then Bryan Woo is since he's Mr. Consistency, I want to give him the most amount of games that we can possibly give him because even though he's not winning you games, we know that he's not losing you games most of the time. And so that's where I think the Mariners evaluation for the opening day starter should be, not who's going to be like the absolute best. If you have Tarek Skubal, that's different. If you have Paul Skeens, that's different. But with the Mariners having five pitchers that are basically all the same, maybe barring Luis Castillo because he's on a steady decline. But even Castillo, same as the five pitchers, I think. I think it's more coming down to consistency rather than absolute ace potential. And so Bryan Woo over Logan Gilbert for me.
Yeah, I mean, you said it right there. I think that's the way the Mariners are going to go with, right? And obviously, at the end of the day, right? If Wu is not our best pitcher this year, then in the playoffs we can have our ace designation be whoever was the best, right? I mean, it's kind of like none of these pitchers are like you said, like a Tarik Skubal. They're we have a lot of really good pitchers, but it's not like a true ace. There's only so many Terry Scubles and Garrett Crochets out there in the world. So that's just the way I see it. I don't think it's that much of a concern. If Gilbert is not the opening day starter, I don't think he'll take it personally. Like I don't think Luis Castillo, when he wasn't the opening day starter, took it too personally, right? So I mean, that's just kind of how it is in the baseball world. So that's what I'll say about that.
And yeah, who do you guys think should be the opening day starter? Should it be Gilbert the way that it was 2025, or do you agree with us? Should it be Bryan Wu? Also, who do you think the Mariners should go out and get in the infield market? Infield market is slim. There is nobody out there other than a select few players. So if you have some players that haven't been discussed that might be a good fit for the Mariners, send it down in the comments and we'll check it out. So thank you everyone for tuning in. Check us out on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and our beautiful faces on YouTube. Check out our Instagram. And as always, go Mariners.